The night I came home from the hospital, the November air smelled like rain and something burning. I remember thinking it was someone's dinner, a pot left too long on the stove. I remember thinking how strange it was that such an ordinary smell could exist on the most extraordinary night of my life. I had a baby in my arms, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, wrapped in a white flannel blanket with yellow ducks, eyes squeezed shut like the world was already too bright. I had named her Noor, light. Because when the nurse placed her on my chest at 3:42 in the morning, I had wept so hard I couldn't breathe, and everything inside me had finally made sense. My husband Rayan was not there for the birth. He was in Germany for his company's quarterly summit. He had promised he would be back in time. He was not. He called from a hotel room and watched his daughter enter the world through a phone screen, propped against a water glass, and he cried. And I forgave him in that moment because I was too full of love to hold anything else. His mother, Farida, drove me home. She was a tall woman, angular in the way of someone who has spent a lifetime holding themselves, rigid against softness. She had sharp cheekbones and sharper opinions, and a way of saying my name, Layla, that always sounded faintly like a verdict. She had never approved of me, not when Rayan first brought me home, not at our wedding, not when I decorated our house in warm creams instead of the cold marble she preferred. Every choice I made was a small wrongness she filed silently behind her eyes. But she had smiled at the hospital. She held Noor with something that looked, for one disarming moment, like genuine tenderness. I allowed myself to believe a grandchild might finally soften her toward me. I should have known better. Farida did not soften. She redirected. We pulled into the driveway of our house, the house Rayan and I had saved 3 years to afford, the one with the kitchen window that caught morning light and made the whole room glow. She helped me inside, made tea, settled Noor in the bassinet. Then she sat across from me, folded her hands neatly, and said, "I need you to find somewhere else to stay." The room went very quiet. My body was 3 days postpartum. I looked at her and could not find a single word. I did not cry in front of her. That was the only victory I claimed that night. I sat on my own sofa, in my own living room, with my 3-day-old daughter sleeping 3 feet away, and I looked at Farida's composed, waiting face, and I made myself breathe. My hands were shaking beneath the blanket I had pulled across my lap. My stitches ached. My milk had just come in that morning, and every part of my body felt swollen and foreign and raw. But I did not cry. I simply said, "I'll think about it," in a voice so steady it surprised even me, and I waited until she left before I fell completely apart. I called my sister Dina at 11 o'clock at night. Dina was a family lawyer. She was also the person who had sat beside me during every hard thing in my life. Our fathers, illness, the miscarriage before Noor, the slow accumulation of small humiliations that had marked my years with Farida. She answered on the second ring, heard 3 words of my voice, and said, "Don't touch anything. Don't sign anything. I'm coming." She arrived within the hour, with her laptop bag over one shoulder and a container of lentil soup in her other hand, because Dina understood that a crisis required both strategy and food. She sat at my kitchen table, opened her files, and asked me one question. "Whose name is on the deed?" I told her. Both names, mine and Rayan's, side by side, is the way we had signed it 4 years ago in a lawyer's office, with cheap pens and enormous grins, believing we were building something permanent together. Dina looked up from her screen and smiled, not warmly, but with the quiet, precise satisfaction of someone who has just found the exact tool a job requires. "She cannot remove you," she said simply, "not without your signature and not without Rayan's formal legal action. This is your marital home. You have rights that are not dependent on her comfort or his absence." Something loosened in my chest. Not everything. There was still so much grief tangled up in what Farida had done, in what Rayan had allowed by not being there, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to look down at Noor sleeping in her bassinet and whisper, almost to myself, "I am not going anywhere." That night, for the first time, the house felt like mine. Rayan came home 4 days later with a stuffed elephant for Noor and guilt written across every line of his face. He walked through the door, smelling like airport and expensive cologne, and he held his with a first time, with a tenderness so genuine it broke something in me. Because love, I was learning, was not the same thing as protection. A man could love you completely and still leave you to face the wolves alone. He kissed my forehead and said he was sorry for missing the birth, and I nodded, and I waited. I waited for him to say what I needed him to say, that he had spoken to his mother, that he had told her what she had done was unacceptable, that his wife and newborn child would never be made to feel unwelcome in their own home again. He said none of it. What he said instead, carefully, in the measured tone he used when he had already rehearsed the conversation, was, "My mother means well. She just worries. You know how she is." I looked at him for a long moment. Noor was asleep against my chest in the carrier, her small, warm weight the only thing keeping me anchored to something gentle. "She asked me to leave," I said quietly. 3 days after I gave birth. In our house. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She didn't mean it like that." "How did she mean it, Rayan?" He didn't answer. And that silence, that careful, cowardly silence, told me everything his words had been artfully avoiding. He was not going to choose me. He was not going to choose wrongness over peace, truth over comfort. He was going to stand in the middle, which is another way of saying he was going to let his mother win by simply never opposing her. I had loved this man for 6 years. I had built a life inside his, and believed it was also mine. That night, after he fell asleep, I went to the kitchen and sat alone in the dark with a cup of cold tea and my sister's legal notes spread across the table. I read every word. I read them the way a person reads a map when they finally admit they are lost and must now find their own way out. I began to make a list. Assets, accounts, documents, rights. I did not cry. I planned. She came on a Sunday. Farida never did anything without an audience, so she brought 2 of her sisters and a cousin, whose primary talent was nodding in agreement at whatever Farida said. They arrived at 11 in the morning, unannounced, the way people do when they believe a place belongs to them. An announcement is therefore unnecessary. I heard the car doors from the kitchen, and I did not move to the window. I already knew. Dina had warned me this moment would come. The formal push, the family pressure, the collective weight of women who had decided that my quiet persistence was an inconvenience to be resolved. I had been preparing for 3 weeks. I opened the front door before Farida could knock. I was dressed neatly, hair done, Noor asleep upstairs with Dina watching her. I smiled and said, "Please come in," and something flickered across Farida's face. Surprise, maybe, or the first faint recognition that this was not the version of me she had been expecting. I had set the dining table with tea and biscuits. I had also set it with a manila folder, a digital recorder already running, and a chair at the head that I sat down in before anyone else could claim it. Farida began her speech. It was elegant, in its way, layered with concern and tradition and soft implications that I was too young, too inexperienced, too fundamentally insufficient for the life I was living in this house. Her sisters murmured support at the correct intervals. The cousin nodded. It lasted perhaps 4 minutes. When she finished, I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I opened the folder. "This is the property deed," I said pleasantly. "Both names. Mine first, actually, alphabetically." I slid a second paper forward. "Sid. This is a letter from my lawyer outlining my rights as co-owner and primary residential parent. And this," I added, tapping the recorder gently, "has been running since you arrived." The room changed temperature. Farida stared at the papers. Her sisters exchanged a look. The cousin stopped nodding. "I am not leaving this house," I said, still pleasantly, still smiling, pouring tea as though we were simply having a lovely Sunday visit. "Noor was born here. This is her home, and I would like more sugar in mine, if anyone is offering." Nobody spoke for a very long time. The sweetest revenge, I had learned, does not roar. It simply sits at the head of the table, pours tea, and lets the paperwork do the talking.